Why your rice never tastes right. Today we're going to dive into the world of rice, my philosophy behind rice, how I cook it, and the big no-nos that I see often. Welcome back to my channel, Shota Cooks. This is my channel where Carrot interviews me, and we get to know each other, we all just kind of get to know each other. And on the background, I'm going to be cooking. I'm going to make some lunch for myself. What I have today is I have some cabbage. I'm going to make a little cabbage salad. I have some chicken breast that's been marinated in koji. So I'm going to slice that up and I'm going to bread it and fry it. And for the frying, I actually have some okonomiyaki batter left over from a shoot that I did. So I'm going to use that as a base, bread it, fry it, and I think it's going to come out pretty good. Let's see what happens. And if it's not good, lessons are learned and failures are made and enthusiasm is still there. On that note, Carrot, take it away.
Hey everyone, I'm Carrot and I'm super excited to dive into our first question. So let's start with something fundamental. Do you wash your rice?
Do I wash my rice? That's actually a great question. I will say I'm a Japanese chef. I grew up in a Japanese household, so I wash my rice. Do all Japanese people wash their rice? Yes and no. I'm going to nerd out about this topic a little bit as well. There's some cuisines or some cultures that don't wash their rice, and I think the philosophy and the thought process behind what rice is completely different. So there's no correct or incorrect way, right? You can consider anything flavor. The nuka, the rice bran that's on the outside, Japanese people really like to clean that flavor off. So that's why when Japanese chefs cook it, majority of chefs will wash it so they can get the purity of flavor. But with that said, the other cuisines, I really do enjoy the philosophy and the thought process of almost using that dirty rice flavor, the rice bland flavor, and balancing that out with fat, acid, and salt to kind of bring out almost a different earthiness, a raw rice flavor. I think that's kind of going to be the best way to say it, like a raw rice flavor out of the rice. And I think that's beautiful. And kind of diving into washing rice, why Japanese people wash rice is Japanese people like to get the flavor of that rice, the nuka, the rice bran off, because it's got this kind of earthy tone that doesn't really go well with Japanese food in general, or what Japanese people consider what rice is, what white rice tastes like. So, but the idea is rice is like any other ingredient. The more you wash it, the more flavor you'll lose, because you'll lose that glutamate, you'll lose that sweetness that's inside of it. And the difference between good quality rice and cheap quality rice in Japan is good quality rice, they do a great job at processing already sweet rice that's full of glutamate, because what that does is you don't really have to wash it as much. And if you get cheap rice, what happens is it sits in a bag with rice bran, so now your entire rice is going to start curing in that flavor in the bag, concealed in itself. So, I would say that's the biggest difference that I would say that I see within the two, or the good rice and the cheap rice. And now in Japan, there's also a really popular thing coming out called musenmai. It's been popular for the last few years, but now I feel like everyone's starting to use it more and more, especially on a commercial scale when you're running, franchises or whatnot. And what that is it's rice that already is pretty much completely cleaned off, so you don't have to wash it. That's the idea behind it, right? So, which I think is really interesting. And now I see a lot of franchises that use it, because when you write an operation, it's going to come out more consistent and sweet. Because that was one of the things that I noticed. Like, a lot of the rice in these little casual spots that you can get a rice bowl for like $300 or 300 yen, or sorry, that's not even a thing, or like 500 yen, 800 yen, is just so still delicious. And I realized the way they make that happen is by using these musenmai, because the only thing you have to do as an operator is weigh this, weigh that. And Japan's so, Japan's all about rice, so there's all these machines that you can press 10 cups, and 10 cups of rice already come out measured. It's literally like a box measuring system for rice already made for you. So those, I would say, that's me nerding out a little bit on rice to start with. Yeah. What do you think, Carrot? I think that's a pretty good answer.
That was a fantastic answer. I love how you broke down the different perspectives on washing rice. It's really cool to see all those nuances. All right, let's jump into our next question. What role does rice play in Japanese food culture?
I would say rice is currency, literally. Back in the day, it was used as currency as well. I think it's what us Japanese people sustained ourselves on. It was one of the most valuable things right after gold, silver, and sugar. I mean, I actually don't know. I should probably look into that. Maybe it was more that than gold, just because I feel like rice and sugar was something I heard about often growing up, being one of those things that a lot of Japanese people used to use for currency.
That's such a fascinating perspective. It really shows how deeply ingrained rice is in the culture and history of Japan. All right, let's keep this going with our next question. What are some common mistakes you see people making when cooking rice, especially outside of Japan?
I would say the most common mistake I see is overwashing. That is definitely a thing. Rice, kind of like I said earlier, is full of glutamate, sugar, so the more you wash it, the more flavor you lose. And I see restaurant chefs and people just like running it underwater for a long time, right? And I'm just looking at it going, well, that's why your rice just doesn't taste like anything. That is just one of those big no-nos that I think a lot of people misconceive as like, oh, the water needs to get white and clear. That's not the case. Yes, you want that nuka to come off. You want that flavor to come off. But think about what that white is coming off, right? A lot of that white that's coming off is rice flour, technically. The rice flour that's been, the rice that's been sitting in the bag, rolling around, the edges start to get tumbled, kind of like a rock tumbler. I don't know if you guys or have heard of a rock tumbler. Anyways, that's a different hobby of mine. We can get into that another time. I'll show you some polished rocks later. Anyways, so it's that water or that little flour that comes off, and that's what makes the water white for the most part. Also, when you think about how you wash it, if you are like scrubbing at it, just going to town, really trying to scrub it, rice is pretty fragile. Think about it, right? Like a rock. If you scrub two rocks together, slowly those rocks will start to get round, and you can start to feel it chip away. Rice, same thing, right? It's more sensitive, delicate than rock. So when you think about it getting processed or, being manhandled, as some may say, I don't know why I do that voice, but I do. You're going to get more rice flour that's coming out. So, that's another mistake that I've seen where someone's just washing, scrubbing, and all the rice is cracked, and they're trying to run it underwater until that's clean, which is just, now your rice has more exposure, more open space, and that's all running underwater, aka all your glutamate, all your sweetness, all that aroma and flavor that rice carries is getting washed away. So I would say those are kind of if that answers your question, my friend.
That definitely answers it, and it's such a great explanation. It really highlights how delicate and nuanced the process of washing rice can be. All right, let's keep going. Next up, could you share a bit about the different methods of cooking rice, like using a Donabe versus a rice cooker or a stovetop pot?
That's interesting. I actually remember this one class I took in culinary arts school called Suji. I think it was one of my favorite classes, or it was my favorite class. I would say top 10 for sure, classes that I took. Look at me being indecisive. I can't decide which one. It's my favorite. It's not my favorite. Anyways, and what they did was they had the same rice, washed it the same way, and they cooked one in a rice cooker. They cooked one in a donabe, and they cooked one in. Wow, these are big chicken strips. They cooked one in a pot, and there was definitely a difference. The rice cooker in the pot was pretty similar, but the donabe had an obvious flavor difference, and that was the sweetness. The sweetness and the aroma that was coming out was just night and day. And you know, one of the things the teacher was explaining was it's really about how the heat is getting transferred. Donabe, you know, nowadays there are those good new IH ones, especially in Japan, that cook rice at an incredible level. But it really is how much high heat can you give it, right? Stone pots can really carry that heat, which will help get that sweetness, because you want to cook it fast and quick. A lot of times when you see rice cooker and it's set for like 40 minutes, that is actually including the time. If you know, when you cook it in a stovetop, you gotta let it rest, you gotta let it soak for a second. Rice cookers, what that's doing is a lot of times it's already including a lot of that time included, as well as the resting period, because you don't want to take it out right away, right? Like, you know, let it rest and kind of make sure that heat goes all the way to the center, to the core.
That's really fascinating. It's amazing how the cooking method can bring out such different qualities in the rice. It really shows that there's a lot of nuance to something as seemingly simple as cooking rice. All right, let's move on to the next question. Have you ever had a moment where you messed up cooking rice, especially when it was a high pressure situation?
Who knows this one? Absolutely. You know, my worst mistake or worst moment I messed up rice was the finale of Top Chef. You know, honestly, it was one of those experiences where Top Chef was intense. It was also the COVID season. We filmed in 2020 in Portland, which was just an absolute insane time, from the energy that was just in the city, the smoke, the protests, COVID, just, you know, looking back at it, very surreal, almost feels fake. And after a month and a half, you know, we had to stay in COVID or quarantine for our first week or 10 days, I believe. And then we went into cooking. The finale was literally a month and a half later from that point. So I was a month and a half in, absolutely exhausted, delusional, and I try to cook way too much rice. The BTU on the stovetop was weak, and it just didn't cook through properly. It just didn't make it in time, and I remember just getting off of it, and the second I got off, I was like, why did I do such a noob thing? Why didn't I just take half of the rice out? But you know, I think being on Top Chef at that time, like I was just exhausted, delusional, and I think honestly a little bit ready to go home, though I wasn't ready to go home the second we were done. It's just how it works.
I can only imagine how intense that must have been, especially under all that pressure and exhaustion. It's amazing how those experiences can really stick with you. All right, let's keep this going. Up next, I'd love to hear about what rice meant in your household when you were growing up.
Rice was shishoku. It was the main thing. My dad is such a rice person. Dinner, if it wasn't rice, it wasn't really a dinner meal. We didn't have pizza for dinner. We didn't have pasta for dinner. Pasta and pizza were more late night or afternoon snacks, lunch. My dad also absolutely hated fast food, so fast food was one of those things that my dad or my mom would cheat and take us to once in a while when dad was out of town, because, you know, it was like, my dad would always be like, don't feed that stuff to the kids, which, thank you, Father. I appreciate it now. I think that being told no when I was younger is what made me want it more. Yeah.
I love how central rice was to your family's meals and traditions. It really shows how important it is culturally and personally.
Also, sorry, I'm gonna dive into that question. One more thing that I want to talk about rice. Rice really is a fundament, right? Like, or fundamental part of Japanese culture. And one thing that I remember is I didn't really have the biggest stomach growing up, and I always struggled to finish my meal. But my mom had a very specific rule that came from my grandpa, which was you do not get up from the table until you finish every grain of rice. And yes, I'm saying every single grain of rice, which I still do at this point in my life. I hate paper plates because it's so hard to take the last few grains of rice. But that's one thing that I do that I keep dear to myself. I teach it to my son as well. And why I think it's so important is it's just the subtle things of not wasting that you remember. It's what the word itadakimasu, where it comes from. Itadakimasu is something that Japanese people say before they eat a meal. And what that means is to receive, because you're not just receiving from the person who cooked it, you're receiving it from the planet Earth, you're receiving it from the person who harvested, you're receiving it from the person who delivered it, you're receiving it from every single person that was involved into getting this dish on your table, from the person who lined it up in the grocery store, right? And I think when you think about itadakimasu, every single grain of rice, that's what it's representing. You're representing everyone's effort to build this economy and society where we can share land, and sensitive topic right now. Anyway, sorry, not going to go there. I'm not going to get into politics. We can share land and produce beautiful produce. We have a system where that can get delivered to grocery stores, which can come to your home. And your mother, your friends, your father, you, your girlfriend, whoever in your life can cook. I think that is what the representation of itadakimasu and eating the last grain of rice represents.
And that's such a beautiful philosophy, and it really shows the deep appreciation and mindfulness that goes into every meal. It's such a lovely tradition to pass on. All right, let's move on to the next topic. I'd love to know if you could only pick one rice dish as your favorite, what would it be and why?
Tamakake gohan or butter rice. Those are the two most iconic Japanese comfort dishes. Tamakake gohan is TKG, shortened. It's what every Japanese kid grows up with. I mean, both dishes. It's what it is. It's hot rice. You crack eggs. Sometimes it's just egg yolk, egg whites, and you mix it up. You drop a little soy sauce, and that's tamakake gohan. Tama stands for the egg. Kake means pour over. Gohan means rice. Different renditions of that. You can add a little sesame oil, add some kimchi on top, add some salty. I like eating it with salty things. Butter rice, on the other hand, is rice, warm rice, butter, and soy sauce instead of egg. Right now, my dish that I've really been into is this dish that I'm calling matsutake butter rice. I make matsutake rice out of the rehydrated or the dehydrated matsutakes I picked last year. I actually love dehydrating mushrooms because the flavor gets condensed. And then I use that dashi and some regular bonito kombu dashi to cook the rice. When I cook the rice, I do 90% regular rice, 10% mochi rice. It adds that nice sweetness and almost this sharper texture that distinguishes kind of this rice, each grain of rice a little bit more when you enjoy it. So you cook it in that matsutake dashi, and when it comes out, you pour a little bit, you put a little butter and some more rice on top, and it is so umami forward. It just punches you in the face. Just one little bite is comfort, delicious, umami, just everything that I enjoy in life.
That sounds absolutely delicious and so comforting. It's amazing how much depth of flavor you can get with just a few simple ingredients and techniques. All right, let's keep exploring all these awesome rice insights. Up next, I'd love to hear about some surprising ways that people can use rice at home beyond the usual dishes.
Yeah, I think one fun way that I like to use rice is turning it into rice flour. If you have a little blender, you can turn it into rice flour, and that's great for a lot of different things, from adding into your tempura batter to add a little crispiness, adding into your fried batter, kind of like what I'm making right now, to add more crunch and texture to the dish as well. I think there's many different ways you can think about it and try to utilize rice. Also, rice slurry to thicken up sauces or soups is also a fun texture. Korean people use it in making that slurry for kimchi, which, it's in addition to the flavor that you have, which is great. The old Japanese kintsugi, the plateware where they fix it with gold, they used to use rice with that as the glue. So they would cook rice and put it on top, or use it as glue and mold it together. And once it dries out, they would go ahead and paint a little gold on top. Anyways, check it out. This is the fried little chicken breast. I know, I'm not eating all this for lunch. I'm going to bring some to my mom's because I'm going to go see them and the nieces and everyone later.
That sounds like such a fun plan, and I love that you're sharing the food with your family. It's so cool how versatile rice can be, from thickening sauces to even being used in traditional art forms. It really shown how incredible this ingredient is. All right, let's wrap up with one final thought. Any last rice tips or words of wisdom you want to share with everyone?
Rice tips or wisdoms? I'm just going to have to say, rice is life. It's one of those things that, especially if I'm like in a Midwest city, right, Milwaukee, I'm going to bring some instant rice with me to the hotel. Why? Is because I just feel so much more, especially if I'm there for like a week, right? So just give me a second. Just check this out. Can you see that juicy chicken breast? Man, it's so juicy because it's marinated in koji, which is that lactic acid, which is almost the same thing, or I think it's pretty much the same thing it has in buttermilk, where it's going to keep it tenderized, break it down, and even if you overcook it a little bit, it stays juicy. You can get lactic acid powder on itself. Anyways, that's a whole different question. But I want to showcase what I made today. So I made you a little good old classic chicken katsu dish. I'm going to put some tonkatsu sauce on top and eat it with rice. The chicken breast, let me just flip it to the side so you can see the inside. I feel like that's just a better presentation. That's my dinner, or lunch. Anyways, thank you for coming to another episode. Again, as always, if there's any topics you want me to cover, please put it underneath, comment, because it actually helps my channel. If you can like it, comment, subscribe it, share it, I would appreciate all of that. Thank you again, and until next time, cheers.